repealed in part of that legislation last year. So the reference, there needs to be a technical amendment to that, make sure that is KSA 793602 without the C. And that'd be in both the definition of candy and soft drinks. But then soft drinks would be, soft drinks does not include beverages that contain milk or milk products, soy, rice, or similar milk substitutes, or beverages that are greater than 50% vegetable or fruit juice by volume. And candy is also then defined as a preparation of sugar, honey, or other natural or artificial sweeteners in combination with chocolate, fruits, nuts, or other ingredients or flavors in the form of bars, drops, or pieces. Candy does not include any preparation containing flour and shall require no refrigeration. With that, Madam Chair, I can stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, what questions do we have for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will begin with proponent testimony. And we will, since we are moving along on a good clip and only have 4 conferees in person or orally today, we will give everyone 7 minutes to testify. And we will begin with Roy Leonardson, Visiting Fellow, Opportunity Solutions Project. Welcome to committee.
Good morning, Chairman Erickson and members of the committee. Thank you. First of all, congratulations on having a ks committee. It's pretty exciting. I actually work in 32 states, and I believe you're the first state out of the gate to actually have a hearing and get going and to hear stuff. So I'm honored to be here and honored to be a part of that. And, you know, when you look at government efficiency, one of the core tenets of the government efficiency issue is to make sure that programs do what they say they're going to do and they align with the values of the taxpayer. I can't think of a better bill to start off with than this bill right here. And let me be brief, though 7 minutes seems like an eternity, having testified all over the country. I'm not sure I could possibly take 7 minutes. First of all, I like the way this bill is crafted because you've specifically referenced Kansas statutes on how you describe soda and candy, and I think you've avoided a lot of problems. In addition to that, you've specifically specified in the Code of Regulations, so the bill is consistent. We've run into other states where that is inconsistent, and I do think that sends a better message to retailers and to other folks that you're not inventing new laws or new definitions. And so I think out of the gate, that is important to say. Here's what I really want to communicate about the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. There's 3 big things. Right now, you're paying twice for food stamps, and you got about 72% of the folks who are also on food stamps on Medicaid. What do I mean by that? Up to 26% or more of the folks here in Kansas have some type of diabetes or type 2 diabetes or have some disease related to overconsumption of sugary drinks. I have a long list of great studies. I know there's folks that question that. I have stuff to get that I can leave you from Stanford, Harvard, National Institutes of Health. I've got a nice long list that creates that link between the importance of recognizing that issue. The other issue is that it's the #1 purchase with food stamps is soda. But of all of the food products available, #1 is soda, #3 is candy, and if you look at the top 10, it's rounded out with chips. It's a $400 billion program nationally. So we are essentially funding hundreds of millions of dollars a year and buying soda and the sugary drinks and candy. I don't think that's a wise move. So I think that smart government means smart spending, and that's why I'm here. Nice to be in front of the ks committee. You already do some things with SNAP that are important to remember. You can't buy alcohol and you can't buy cigarettes. Why is that? It's because the program is meant to serve the public good. The WIC program, Women, Infant, and Children, you have most 50,000 folks here in Kansas on that program. It's universally recognized as a very well-run program. None of that is allowed on the WIC program. None of those products. None of them. And while I appreciate the profits and the convenience stores and all the folks that profit from that stuff, I think it's important that those monies are redirected in other spaces. This bill in no way restricts people from buying soda and candy. This is not Mayor Bloomberg in New York banning big gulps for everybody. This is simply saying with taxpayer dollars, food stamp dollars, we want a waiver that prohibits you from buying soda and candy and redirects that towards health. So a couple of other just objections that I've heard in the past, I'll just briefly mention. There has been a legitimate concern in the past about the notion of a food desert. Folks who live in areas where there are very limited access. I did a little bit of research, checked on some of your major cities, Kansas City, Wichita, other places. The good news is that Dillon's, Walmart's of the world, Instacart, all deliver now into all of these areas. They all take EBT cards, and if you go onto like the Dillon's website right now, you can see EBT eligible. And so I just point that out because that's a significant change for a lot of us. I want to close by making it maybe just a little more real, if I can, about what we're talking about here. And it's about real numbers. I think I have this. A Monster energy drink costs $3.39. That's about 2 loaves of bread, to give you some perspective. 20-ounce bottle of Coke, $2.29. That's about 2 pounds of bananas. A bag of Doritos, $5.49. You can get a dozen eggs and a half-gallon of milk, though the eggs seem to go up every day. King-size Reese's Cups, $2.49, about the same as 2 pounds of carrots. These are real decisions that are made that are impacting. I ran the numbers. If you go on to Dillon's, I'm not picking on Dillon's, I just knew the grocery store. And so I looked at it, and you can buy a 12-pack, EBT eligible, delivered to your door of Monster energy drinks, and it's $23 plus tax. $23 plus tax feeds a family of 4 chicken stir-fry meal. I know that because I do it and I make it, and that's what it's about, $20. So these are big issues here. This isn't just some minor thing. And like I said, it's the #1 expenditure in the country, soda. And so what I'm asking today is to support Senate Bill 79. Let's request the waiver from the administration. My sense is that under the Make America Healthy Again banner and the way that the country is moving, that these waivers will be accepted. States will be given the opportunities to do that. We've got about 16 bills in the country right now looking at this. It passed in Wyoming this week, 7-1 out of committee. I'll be here, testifying, I think, Thursday in Idaho. Next week, I'll be in Mississippi. It's a real movement here. And I think there's also room for recognizing, as we make new decisions on how we use the SNAP program, I think it will strengthen the SNAP program and make it much less under attack once people realize this is actually a supplemental nutrition assistance program and not a soda and candy program. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions as best I can. If I don't have an answer, I will look it up and send it to you later.
Thank you. And if you're able to stay, we will wait and take all proponent testimony and then open it up for proponent questions.
Terrific.
So we will now committee move to Nick Reinecker. Welcome. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Nicholas Reinecker from Inman, Kansas. I'm a proponent to this bill because I believe it will facilitate good stewardship of taxpayer money, promote healthy choices. It disregards certain unhealthy elements of corporate lobbying and eliminates some hypocrisy. You have my testimony. You can check out the references there. In 2016, the Journal of the American Medical Association published a historical document review that shed light on a massive conspiracy by the sugar lobby. Without morals and ethics, crony conspiratorial capitalism can be a very shrewd and profitable thing to do, because if review papers, especially those peer-reviewed with conflict of interest issues, get published in a very prominent journal, they tend to shape the overall scientific discussion. We see that in a lot of conversations under this dome, whether it be about pharma, gambling, alcohol, or tobacco. As a citizen, I love it when you guys come off the floor and are immediately bombarded by a group of lobbyists. When it comes to sugar, though, I've heard as much as 10% of SNAP goes to sugar water. Pop, soda, juice, less than 10%, et cetera. And the consequences of consuming these substances, especially the synthetic ones, you have this blood sugar spike and then a crash, instead of a nice even line where it helps the body. So your consequences, you got poor concentration, high blood pressure, liver disease, and just an overall poor metabolic condition with inflammation. So this also puts a burden on me, the taxpayer, not only once, but twice. So I first have to help someone receiving these benefits pay and give them access to buy and consume these harmful substances. I give an example. I went to Walmart, and the lady in front of me didn't have enough money to buy something, and I was going to reach and give her some money to help her out, but I waited. Come to find out, she had taken some gummy bears and some other products off and then did that transaction with an EBT card. So then I also have the burden as a taxpayer. After they go through that life and are hurting their body, I am sometimes having to pay for the drugs, let's say like Ozempic or something else, or other pharmaceuticals to combat the harm that's been done, or even surgery type that. And I won't go into contract nursing issues, but something to think about. So let's talk about the psychoactive or drug response and the dopamine response, how substances cross the blood-brain barrier when we desire something. If I bring a plate of carrots in here and celery, and I bring a plate of donuts and brownies over here, how many people are going to go to the carrots and celery versus the donuts and brownies? Because they know the combination of refined carbohydrates and fats often found in ultra-processed foods seem to have a super addictive effect on brain reward systems, making them akin to substances like nicotine in cigarettes or even heroin. Like I said, that spike and crash. So we also know that a lot of these foods or substances have little or no nutritional value, which starve the cells in the body and create inflammation. Talk about harm to self or others. Also, there's issues of concentrate, added sugars, which is removed from the original source and added to the foods and drink, is also associated with inflammation, versus natural sugars, which are found in the plants, issues like whole foods and also maple syrup. You look at an ingredient label for fake maple syrup versus the real stuff, and you can kind of see there. So what are some things we could do? Buy the fruit and juice it yourself. Walk that extra mile or two to the store to get exercise and also be able to get your stuff. We have exceptions like the WIC program for infants and mothers who can't obviously walk to a store. So they may, they have those programs. But this bill will help Kansas to take an offensive stance as a state and try to eliminate unhealthy options. Those in opposition, I believe, will sell more vegetables because if the others aren't on the list, people still got to eat. So they're going to buy the stuff that's there that hopefully is good for them, regardless of their dependence on government. So I run a restaurant. I dabble in carbohydrates and fats and proteins and spices and seasonings. And for all practical purposes, I guess I could be considered a drug dealer because I do offer coffee with caffeine and chocolate pie with cocoa. But our motto is real ingredients for real people. We use real butter. It costs like $4.29 a pound versus the fake hydrogenated Butterit, which costs a lot less. How am I doing on time? Minute and a half, thank you. Also, the burden to the administrative state, I think you can find ways around that. Maybe look at approved stickers. You'll have to figure out enforcement piece. But a lot of this, there is a profit motive for not doing stuff like this. And I don't care about the tax revenue. I don't care about the state going over to state lines. Those are all poor arguments. And Kansas may lose $15 million of federal funds if we just eliminate SNAP altogether, but I think we're not trying to punish the 63,000 households and people, but we're trying to help them, not harm them, and promote government efficiency both at a federal level and a state level. Other options, you could have some rations contracts with culturally appropriate options. You can eliminate it altogether and, of course, forfeit the federal funds. And I would also like to see us amend it to include other harmful substances such as trans fat and other caffeine, stuff like that. But in the final analysis, our poor health is an existential threat to our country. We can see it in every shopping aisle, cereal aisle, and everything like that. I will say one thing on the drug testing, and many of you guys know me why I come up here, but certain drugs like cannabis stay in the system 30 days versus methamphetamine, which if you stay off of it for 72 hours, you can pass a drug test, which you kind of look at those issues and maybe
Mr.
see that. So anyway,
Thank you.
thank you for allowing me to speak today, and I will stand for any questions. I do support this bill.
Thank you so much for being here and your testimony. Committee, that is the end of our proponent testimony. So questions, Senator Alley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed on the front page of the letter from the Kansas Division of the Budget that the Department of Children and Families indicates the enactment of Senate Bill 79 would have no fiscal effect. If that is true, then is that just for now, just so that we're going to spend the same amount of money as under the program? Is that what they're saying?
Senator, I believe that's correct. That it won't reduce the amount of money or benefits to families. It's just that they will not be able to purchase those items with those benefits, but they would still receive the same amount.
Thank you.
Yes. Other questions, Senator Schmidt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm finding all sorts of unusual bedfellows in this conversation. With some unlikely supporters of Medicaid expansion in Kansas, acknowledging the egg rationing that we have going on all across the country, and I think someone wanted to take on big corporate America. So I'm all for it. Question for Mr. Leonardson. What's the cost for the retailers here?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator, if I may. So the cost of the retailers, I think you have folks who sit behind you that can tell you the cost to the retailers. I think if you look at the reflection of the fiscal note that's from the state, it's very static. To follow up with that question. So what the impact will be long term is not known, but the specific cost to the retailer, my opinion is, having owned a couple of businesses, as long as your point of sale system is in alignment with existing state law, and you're not creating a whole new category, redefining stuff, that has a tremendous impact on the way it impacts business. And thankfully, the revisers folks here drafted it exactly in alignment with your current tax structure. So the way the law is written, it's already in that point of sale system.
So the Cornerstone Market in Inman and all the small mom and pop grocers, you don't think that they would experience increased costs as a result of this bill?
It's still the same point of sale system. No, I do not. Madam Chairman, I do not. Now, someone may, in the system I had, it did not. But remember, you're still using an electronic benefit transfer card. You're using an EBT card that's already tied to a system that already exists. And if you get the waiver, then the federal government obviously participates in that point of sale transaction. So I don't anticipate major costs as long as you're consistent with existing.
I'm hearing a pretty confused answer. It sounds like you're not really sure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Care to respond, Mr. Leonardson?
I'm pretty sure it doesn't, but there may be some small mom and pop store that uses an old system I don't know about. I'm telling you, generally speaking, point of sale system is, that's the whole point.
Thank you. We'll move on to Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Roy, thank you. This is requesting a waiver, so it's going to require approval. Do you think there's an issue with that? You sort of touched on that, but would you expound on that a little bit? Has this been done before and failed, or how can you respond to that?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, yeah, this has been denied in the past, and in the first Trump administration, it was not successful either. I think there has been a fundamental sea change, and if you listen to the Maha stuff that was endorsed and embraced by the current president of the United States, I do expect to see a change. Having worked in 32 states and with the federal government, change that comes from state capitals is much more effective than trying to lobby folks in Congress. And so, as you probably have seen, I think Governor Landry, Governor Huckabee Sanders has already sent letters in making these requests. I believe that Florida is making that request. So I think you're going to see a number of states making that request.
Okay. And just follow up. It was not really a further question, but I worked in a grocery store when I was in high school and college, and you couldn't use food stamps to buy anything like this, back then. And so probably a good idea to kind of return to some normalcy. Thank you.
Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Roy, for being here. My question is this, can you tell me what the rates of diabetes are among SNAP users?
Yeah, I can. And Madam Chairwoman, Senator, yeah, and I actually have a report that I will leave with you that has the latest rates. 1 in 5 Americans between ages 2 and 19 are obese. Among children's ages 2 to 5, the obesity rate is 13%. For adults, it's more than 40%. I believe the number in Kansas is 37.1, if my memory serves me correctly. I'm happy to get you that data. And I have all of those numbers and stuff on the report with the sources that you can get that we took from the National Institutes of Health as well.
Okay, but that's like overall population.
That's, Madam Chairwoman, Senator, yes. And so there's also a differentiation in between, and there's some great studies from Stanford and other places that looked at folks that are on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and those that are not, that are similar incomes, and there's a significant difference between those two different populations in obesity and also diabetes and other rates too. And the studies are interesting, and I'm happy to provide them. I found them to be good reading. So the answer is there's a difference, and the studies have proved that.
Okay, and the reason I ask that is because I did look it up, and there doesn't show statistical difference between general population and food stamp or WIC or users. So my question is, I mean, obviously it's a problem, the amount of sugar intake and unhealthy foods. So my question is, why not address it at the root cause as far as the corporations producing these things? Things like, I think about the advertising that's directed towards people and children, and just the fact that, you know, comparatively to other countries, we don't have a lot of the same rules in place in terms of food production. So again, you know, if it's bad for one population, it's obviously, as we see in the data, bad for everybody. So again, why not address it at the root?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, you're preaching to the choir. So let me just clarify that by saying that I think that those root changes that you're talking about, I believe if you listen to the testimony from potential, we don't know, I think 10 o'clock today, Secretary Kennedy, those are exactly the type of things that they're talking about. We have a bill in Arizona today that removes red dye and a number of other processed foods from all the school lunch programs. From my perspective, what you've just touched on is sort of a beginning of an awakening of Americans in terms of the food products in Europe versus food products here. That's a lot bigger than me. It's a lot bigger than OSP. But what you're talking about is now for the first time in my generation is why we're standing here today and what the conversation is all over the country. So I concur with your assessment, and we're going to see where this goes.
Any other questions for the proponents? Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What about orange juice?
It's again, going to your laws, 50% or more, I think, of juice, actual juice products are completely exempt. I think the number is 50% in Kansas.
But doesn't it have as much sugar as a lot of sodas?
Following Kansas law, it's exempt because it's natural. I don't know the actual definition. It's exempt. I do know that much because it's a fruit product.
Would you be interested in expanding the purview to orange juice?
No, I'm comfortable, Madam Chairman, Senator, I'm comfortable with Kansas law. I think it works for Kansas. I don't see the need to change it.
And one more question, Madam Chair. I guess why are you so interested in Kansas law?
Two things. I work in Madam Chairwoman, Senator. I founded the Foundation for Government Accountability and Opportunity Solutions Project about 13 years ago now. And our goal was to provide information to as many states as possible that we could work in around welfare, fraud, unemployment, a number of issues. And so for me, these are big federal programs with big federal implications. And so whether I'm in Kansas or Wyoming, it's an American problem. And so that's our approach, is that we're sort of we're a nation of red, white, and blue here, not one state versus another on a lot of these big health issues.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for the proponents? Seeing none, we're going to move on to opponent testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. And we have Brian Posler, Executive Director, Fuel True Independent Energy and Convenience Association. You have 7 minutes. Welcome to committee.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for allowing my testimony today. I am Brian Posler. I represent Fuel True Independent Energy and Convenience. We are the statewide nonprofit trade association representing the independent Kansas energy distribution companies and over 2,000 fuel retail outlets across Kansas. So I understand why this bill sounds attractive, right? It's a simple bill. We can all strike a blow against obesity. And why should taxpayers be footing the bill for unhealthy foods, right? It makes sense on its face. The problem is that this bill is not going to solve the problem that we hope to address of obesity. And there are good reasons the USDA has universally, across multiple administrations, denied every single request that has come before it, right? This bill is an unfunded mandate that will cost small businesses time, money, and hassle, make it harder to do business in Kansas, and it could have even worse consequences than that. And why is that? First, the definitions are just a mess. Most dietitians will tell you that in moderation, any given food, if you have a favorite food that is your passion, any given food can become part of a healthy diet. It's the sum product of all your choices, not any individual single health item that you choose. Now, the statute in question that this bill references defines candy such that any item with flour as a listed ingredient is excluded, right? Soft drinks are any non-alcoholic beverage that contain natural or artificial sweeteners. So we end up with bizarre things that we're going to have to work through. Licorice is banned, but Twizzlers are fine because they list flour as an ingredient. A Reese's bar is out, but Milky Ways contain barley flour, so they're okay. Twix, Kit Kats, no problem, flour. You can't have a Coke Zero with 0 calories, but all the Twinkies and Ho-Hos you want to purchase are fine with this bill, right? You can't have a beloved Diet Dr. Pepper, but you can literally go over to the baking aisle and buy a 10-pound sack of granulated sugar. Take it home and sprinkle on everything you want, right? Gerber apple juice, not allowed. Neither is Ocean Spray cranberry juice cocktail. Why? Each are sweetened. So we could do this all day, but unfortunately, this bill is going to force my clerks to have to do just that. My clerks are going to be on the front line trying to fight to educate consumers about all these very seemingly arbitrary lines that just don't make any sense. Second, customers will usually present their SNAP card to pay for their purchases only after everything is rung up. This policy is going to clog up our lines, create controversy with customers who can no longer purchase the things they were hoping to purchase, and it's going to make our clerks' jobs more difficult. Someone has to enter all of these exclusions into our POS systems. And if Kansas does this all by themselves, guess what? It's not going to be universally downloaded from some national company. Like our clerks in our stores are the ones that have to go in and do this product by product to try to figure out what all qualifies and what all doesn't. Every year, hundreds of new C-store products launch. I go to the big NAC show every year, and this last year it was in Vegas. That floor is huge, and it's hundreds of new products every year. We've got to label those products. We've got to label shelves to help people understand what they can and can't do. All of these costs are being borne by our businesses. And oh, by the way, once people learn the new rules and learn what's excluded and what's not excluded, there's no shortage of completely less healthy choices of other things that they could pick that would still be SNAP eligible. Right? There is no study anywhere that shows if we change these SNAP rules, we're going to cure or even greatly reduce obesity. Right? There's all sorts of unhealthy food choices people can make, but they will still be able to make all sorts of unhealthy food choices if we do this. In fact, a recent Brookings Institution study did find that, quote, a ban will likely increase the administrative cost to both the USDA and the retailers, and increase the stigma faced by recipients when they use the benefits, right, being turned away, all of that, but not have the benefit of inducing any behavioral changes. So that's the second point. Third, my final point, my retailers may not be willing to pay these additional costs due to this unfunded mandate coming from the state of Kansas. SNAP acceptance at retailers could very well decline, and that risks food deserts in the most urban and the most rural locations. Now, the proponent talked about how Dillon's can deliver, and that's true in a lot of urban areas. But if you get out into western rural Kansas, my retailer might be the only opportunity for a fresh gallon of milk anywhere in a 30-mile drive, right? We might be the only outlet that takes SNAP benefits that people can turn to for fresh groceries. And that's why you'll see out in rural Kansas, you'll see the retailers there stock shelves differently. They'll have more healthy choices. They'll have not just milk, but they'll have greens, they'll have fruits, they'll have veggies, they'll have other products because they often are the only grocery store in a little town. And so if we decide it's not worth the hassle to continue to take SNAP benefits, then we're going to have those food deserts. So finally, I just want to recall the fact that the Trump USDA in 2018 denied Maine's waiver. That was the most recent request. That federal farm bill is way overdue. There's clearly going to be action happening at the federal level in this next year. We're going to get a farm bill, and that means food stamps are going to be taken care of. And so the worst outcome would be for us to pass something now and then be out of conformity with whatever the feds are going to do. A national solution at the federal level that's uniform is going to be easier for everybody than trying to do a state-by-state specific change. So for all these reasons, my retailers strongly oppose this bill. Please do not pass it.
Thank you. And are you able to stay for questions until?
I am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, committee, our next opponent is Karen Siebert, Advocacy and Policy Advisor for Harvester, the Community Food Network. Welcome to committee. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Karen Siebert, and I'm here today representing Harvesters, the Kansas Food Bank, and Second Harvest Community Food Bank, which together serve the hungry and food insecure in all 105 counties in the state. Last year, our networks of charitable food pantries distributed more than 46 million pounds of food to those in need in Kansas, from our smallest rural communities to our largest metropolitan areas. We oppose SB 79, but I'd like to start today with where we agree, and that's with our common concern about the health of Americans. The increasing rates of obesity and diet-related diseases are very concerning. It's a complex problem that cuts across incomes, geography, and political parties. It's about processed food. It's about physical activity. It's about marketing. It's about genetics. It's about economics. While we wish there was a simple policy lever that would solve this, there's not. The policy solutions suggested today will not solve the problem we face and will, in fact, create new problems that will impact the availability of nutritious food for all of us, particularly those in our rural communities. I've outlined some of those concerns in my written testimony, but I do want to highlight a few things. Unfortunately, the food choices of SNAP recipients mirror the rest of the population. They're the same things that we're all eating. We should all eat better. The bill may be the classic example of do as I say, not as I do. Or maybe it's physician, heal thyself. The previous conferee got into the definitions of candy and the confusion therein with the many things that don't quite work with that. So I won't go into that part, but I did want to talk a bit about the fact that healthy food is simply more expensive food. It's fundamentally a problem for all of us. SNAP benefits, though, certainly help. A recent study showed that low-income SNAP recipients incur 25% less in medical costs than their low-income neighbors who do not have access to SNAP. But SNAP benefits, which can be as little as the minimum of $23 a month, can't make up for the fact that food inflation is up 28% since 2019, well outpacing wage increases. And while we've all felt that, comments about the prices of eggs and all the different things, we've all felt that, it hits low-income families particularly hard. People in the lowest income brackets, the lowest 20% of incomes, spend nearly 1/3 of their income on food, while the top 20% of earners just spend 8% of their income on food. So if you can imagine that you're feeling the impact, people in the lower incomes are definitely feeling that impact. That's one of the reasons that the most recent Map the Meal Gap survey from Feeding America shows that food insecurity in Kansas was up 31% in the previous year. It's economics. And I was trying to come up with an example to explain this to someone, and I don't know how well it works, but I'll try it here. It's almost like you're giving a Section 8 housing voucher to someone and expecting them to rent a LEED certified apartment. It's just not possible to eat that kind of a healthy diet on that low of an income that some folks have. The unintended consequence of this bill is its impact on Kansas's small businesses. As indicated, there's no fiscal impact for the state, but the business impact is significant. And while people may assume that these suggested purchasing restrictions are tied to the SNAP recipient and the beneficiary's EBT card, they're actually attached to Kansas cash registers, as my fellow conferee also suggested. Placing more restrictions and red tape on SNAP retailers will make it more difficult for our small family-owned stores to participate in SNAP. And if families have to travel to a neighboring community, county, or even state to use their SNAP benefits at a big box store, they'll likely do their other shopping there as well, further undermining the viability of Main Street, Kansas. And for the folks that talk about how WIC is a great program, which we agree, it's a very good program. It has very high participation rates with infants because pretty much your option is that you need to have formula. If you're not breastfeeding, you need formula or even need that to supplement. But as it gets older, as the children get older, the requirements become different. And if you have a child with food allergies and it provides dairy and there's no substitute for a different kind of milk that works for them, then you can't use those benefits, and SNAP participation, WIC participation drops, and I think it's at about 50% overall. And so and also the number of vendors providing WIC, because it is more complex for a vendor to provide WIC benefits. There are about 350 WIC vendors in the state, and there are 2,000 SNAP vendors. So if you start putting restrictions like WIC on SNAP vendors, you're going to see, as the fellow conferee said, fewer and fewer companies, small businesses that are going to be able to participate, and you're going to send all those SNAP dollars to the big retailers that can. So with that, I'll conclude that we oppose SB 79. There are better policy options for promoting healthy eating patterns. There are options like double up food bucks, incentive programs that give discounts for encouraging those kinds of healthy food purchases, but I recognize the economics involved, and both are better for SNAP recipients and for all Kansans.
Thank you. Committee, what questions do we have for the opponents? Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Big fan of Harvesters, by the way. If you haven't worked or volunteered at one, you definitely should. It's a great organization. So just thought I'd give you all a shout out there. My question really is for anybody. So when I was a kid, obviously sweets, candies, all that stuff was a reward. So if I go to the grocery store with my kid's been good, want to get my kid a treat, with this bill drafted the way it is, would I be able to say, hey, I'm going to get I wouldn't be allowed to get my kid ice cream at the grocery store? Is that the way I read this, just out of curiosity?
Senator, ice cream is not in the definition of candy, nor are baked goods, such as cakes, donuts, any of that. It is strictly the definition of candy and pop.
Thank God. All right, appreciate it.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if there's anybody in particular. Sounds to me like a lot of people agree that there's a lot of bad stuff out there that maybe we shouldn't be eating. Interested in expanding this to something more inclusive?
If you can just restate your name for the record, please.
Brian Postler from Fuel True Independent Energy and Convenience. Senator Murphy, I think that the Trump USDA summed that up really well in 2018 when essentially the USDA said we're rejecting Maine's request for a waiver, and the reason is because it does not make sense for us to pick winners and losers, right? We want to promote healthy eating. We want to do everything we can, promote to fight for healthy lifestyles. But once we try to go down the road of the definitions, everything just gets so messed up, right? All these things that just don't make any sense come to fruition. So I would not support trying to broaden it out and say, okay, let's say no to this product and no to this product and no to this product. We're better off just doing all the educational things underneath to try to encourage healthy choices for all Americans, not just singling out SNAP recipients.
But didn't the program pick winners and losers to begin with?
Well, not SNAP so much. I mean, you can't buy tobacco products, you can't buy alcohol, but SNAP really is just giving the recipients the opportunity to shop at the grocery store with the same dignity that all of us who are not on SNAP are afforded.
That's what I was getting at, because like I said, when I was in a previous life, a little bit younger. You couldn't buy any of that stuff.
And
So
WIC,
it's-
and WIC is still restricted in that way. There are
as it's-
certain WIC-eligible foods.
My point was, as it got added to it, it picked some winners.
And so SNAP came along later to try to fix some of the problems that WIC had, which was it was so restrictive in terms of the list. So SNAP was designed to allow greater flexibility and choice by the recipients.
Typical government interaction has unintended consequences. Thank you.
Senator Alley?
If you'd stay there for just a moment. Thank you. I went through the grocery store because I was not aware of the WIC program versus the SNAP program, what the differences was. Do you in your stores carry the WIC program?
Most of my retailers do not take WIC. And it's kind of a mixed bag on SNAP, actually. It's sort of like some retailers, it's just kind of a service to the community to continue to take SNAP, but it does come with some hassle. There's some reporting requirements that have to happen. The reimbursement is slow. It's some of the same things that healthcare providers complain about sometimes with Medicaid, that kind of thing. It's the same kind of issues when we're trying to work with the government program. But a lot of my retailers do make some profit off it. I mean, there definitely is a profitable element to that. So they are self-interested in that way. But honestly, the SNAP program itself is just barely worth more than the hassle of all the reporting and strings that get tied to it. So the more difficult we make it to implement, the less likely they're going to want to continue to take SNAP.
I guess the question that I have is, we are saying that programs like this, where we do away with not subsidizing, if you want to call it subsidizing, sugar products in soft drinks, for instance, or candy, is there a suggestion you would have?
Yeah, so I think that we're better off just looking at the overall healthiness of the diet and trying to promote. So the other conferee talked a little about like the doubling up. There's all sorts of things we could do to incentivize so that if you choose to have more healthy green vegetables or things like that you purchase, maybe your SNAP dollars go farther, right, with some subsidy from the federal government, rather than, and so it'd be the reverse. Instead of saying, well, we can't have this and this is excluded and you can't do that, instead you're saying, all right, if you are willing to buy some of these products that we think are good for you, you can stretch your SNAP benefits farther, and that would encourage more of them to consume more of those sorts of vegetables and things that we want to accomplish. So that would be one way of tackling it that would avoid some of this or that kind of definition mess that we get into with this bill.
Okay, we're going to go to Senator Schmidt, and then I have a couple of questions. Senator Schmidt?
Question for either Brian or Karen, and maybe briefly allude this, but if you could try to put a dollar figure or a range for the small mom and pop grocery stores all across the state that they might encounter as a result of this bill.
Yeah, so so it varies by retailer. Some of them do have sophisticated point-of-sale systems, and so they can work with their suppliers to try to get things configured. It just takes some effort and some time, and the more unique Kansas is compared to all the other states, the more challenging that is, right? So there's some of that, but honestly, oftentimes we have a single clerk in our store who has to do everything. They're cleaning up the bathrooms, they're restocking the shelves, they're waiting on customers, right? There's maybe a line. And so anything we do that says, okay, now we're going to start labeling shelves as to what's eligible and what's not, so we don't have to have this hostile conversation every 10 minutes at the cash register, that takes time. So it's just going to be the employee hours that are going to go into all of the implementation of this, right? And so put a dollar cost on it. You know, our retail costs for employees have gone way up in recent years. That's one of the biggest drivers. It's the single largest cost in our business model. And so anything we do that takes more person hours is just going to add to those costs and make it that much harder for the small mom and pops to survive.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, and let's just follow up on that one right there. My mom and dad owned a grocery store, small mom and pop store. I was raised in that. They probably violated every child labor law known to man, because from the time I could, I was stocking shelves, unloading trucks, you name it, I did it. So I know mom and pop grocery stores. And back then, we didn't have the electronic system. It was all manual. And my parents took food stamps back in those days. I don't know that this is going to be difficult for mom and pops to implement is legitimate, but I have a couple of questions. So you say that in your testimony, let me get it out here. The definitions make it a mess to implement. And you hit on a couple of my favorites. Everyone knows I drink Diet Dr. Pepper and eat Twizzlers. It's my go-to, which is fine. And when I go to the grocery store and I want to go get my Twizzlers, I know I go to the candy aisle. It's labeled candy. I know what candy is. So hot foods are not allowed under this. Is that correct? You cannot buy hot foods with SNAP, correct?
Yeah, so anything that is not like prepackaged, anything that's actually prepared on site is not SNAP eligible currently.
And so you have to make exceptions for that in your system, correct?
Yeah, I mean, at the time those got coded in or whatever, there would be.
You said also that there are, you go and you see all these hundreds of other items. When you bring something new into your store, you have to have someone code that in, correct?
Yes, every new product has to be coded in.
So I don't know that the education piece is going to be as difficult as you think. If we tell people you cannot buy poppin' candy, the average person out there has enough common sense to know what poppin' candy is. Are there some technical differences? You bet. But we're going to go by the law that's in here. My biggest overarching question for any of the opponents, do you think that people who are taking taxpayer money are entitled to poppin' candy? That's my question, sir.
So entitled. I think that SNAP benefits are a generous program where taxpayers help subsidize the incomes of families and serve them that would otherwise be in desperate conditions. It's a really important program, and people make choices, right? And so I like SNAP better than I like WIC because those consumers have a broader range of choice. Right? And we have the power to take that choice away from them, but it also strips them a little bit of that dignity. And you mentioned specifically the candy aisle, right? And so the confusion is that if this bill was just the candy aisle, that would be one thing, but it's not. Individual items on the candy aisle will all be in or out based on the definition that we're talking about. And so that literally is going to mean a conversation at the cash register, and we say, sorry, miss, you have to put this back. You can't have this. Oh, I know your kid's there in the cart crying because they want their favorite treat. That's not eligible. You got to put it back. Or they have to fund it themselves, right? And
They know what candy is, and they know what pop is. They know what candy is. They know what pop is. They're not going to know that they can get a Milky Way unless they try it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But that's nothing new, sir. It's nothing new. For decades, we've had to say, you can't buy this with these benefits. That's nothing new. And you did not answer my question, so I do want to know, are people who are taking taxpayer money for literally supplemental nutritional assistance program, are they entitled to purchase poppin' candy? That's what I want to know.
I would say that no recipients are entitled to any benefits. It is the generosity of the taxpayers of the state of Kansas and the federal government and the federal citizens that gift that aid to those recipients. And so in my mind, all dollars that are given to those individuals are a blessing.
And we are not reducing those benefits. We're not saying we're going to cut it. And I agree 100%. This doesn't alleviate the problem. They may not. The difference is you can go buy poppin' candy. You just can't use taxpayer money to do it. One of the opponent written testimony in committee, I do want to call your attention to the written opponent testimony, says keep big government out of our grocery carts. Big government's paying for that grocery cart, with all due respect. And I think it's incumbent upon us to be good stewards of that, to not exacerbate problems. Certainly, if you want to have those things, you can go get them, but not with taxpayer benefits. I want to thank everyone for their participation today. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Seeing no other business before this committee, we are adjourned.